My cousin Julia, who is 27, ended up getting married to my ex-boyfriend Lewis, who is 29, and everything spiraled out of control from there. They spread malicious gossip about me, trashed my reputation in their own wedding speech, and after they got cut off by her mother, they tried to break into my house in the middle of the night. The story is pretty convoluted and stressful, but I want to share every bit of it without holding back. A couple of years ago, Julia started dating my ex-boyfriend Lewis. I am 27 as well, and I had been with Lewis for 3 years before we split up. We started our relationship right after he finished his studies, at a time when I was in my sophomore year of college. We stayed together until a few weeks after my 20th birthday, and looking back, I can honestly say it was a really unhealthy relationship. I regret letting him be my first serious relationship as an adult. While everything might have seemed perfect on paper, in reality, it was dramatically different. Lewis was extremely insecure and overbearing, going so far as to stop me from doing what I wanted to do if it did not align with what he approved of, such as going out with my friends, or even talking to male friends. It felt like he was always lurking in the background, keeping tabs on me, and if I did not conform to his demands, he would twist my perception, make me question my sanity, and try to blame me for the fact that the relationship was on the brink. Unfortunately, I was so desperate to keep him around that I did things I regret. I would bend over backwards to please him, even when it was clearly never going to be enough. He eventually broke up with me, claiming things weren't working out, and after that, he completely cut me off by blocking me. I tried to get in contact with him, but he had vanished from my life, and within 2 months, I heard he had moved on to someone new. It felt like a colossal waste of my time and emotional energy, and I developed a strong dislike for him. We stopped communicating for a while, and I assumed that was the end of it. When I turned 25, he suddenly unblocked me on social media, and reached out to wish me a happy birthday. I found it strange that he texted me out of the blue, especially since I had moved on with someone new by then. Because I had no desire to reconnect with him, I did not respond. But even though I never replied, he kept texting me, as if he hoped I would eventually answer. I had no intention of doing so, so I blocked him again. After that, there was another period of no contact. However, just a few months following my birthday, Julia invited me to her place. We had been close cousins since childhood, basically best friends who happened to be related. She told me she had someone special she wanted me to meet, and to my shock, I discovered it was Lewis. Apparently, the reason he tried texting me on my birthday was that he wanted to clear the air before revealing their relationship. They had met through work, clicked quickly, and their relationship was already serious. I was taken aback, because Julia knew very well how much Lewis had hurt me in the past. She understood the depths of my trauma, yet here she was, dating the very person who had made my life miserable for 3 years. She acknowledged that it might make me uncomfortable, but she hoped I would at least give them a chance. I did try to see things from her perspective. I sincerely wanted to be happy for my cousin, but it was unbelievably overwhelming. Lewis was someone who had inflicted a great deal of pain on me, and considering he was my first adult relationship, the baggage I carried was enormous. I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. Ultimately, I told Julia I was sorry, but I couldn't accept the fact that she was with Lewis and didn't want to keep her in my life anymore. She was understandably upset, and made several attempts to talk it through with me. She kept claiming Lewis had changed, that he was a better, more mature person. I didn't believe it. I had been subjected to so much manipulation and psychological torment from him that I couldn't just overlook it. While I understood she had the freedom to choose him, I also recognized my right to cut them both out of my life. It was a difficult call because Julia and I had once been so close, but I saw no other option for protecting my own mental well-being. From that moment on, I distanced myself from her. For the last 2 years, our contact has been minimal and frosty. As soon as she realized I wouldn't talk to her, she stopped making an effort, too. We would still come across each other at family gatherings, but we stayed on opposite ends of the room, ignoring one another. This was a far cry from how we used to be, 2 cousins who would whisper and laugh together at events. Even so, I thought it was acceptable that we each do our own thing in life. I made peace with it. I didn't harbor any desire for vengeance or wish her ill. I simply wanted her out of my personal bubble. But apparently, that was not enough for Julia. She took matters into her own hands, telling family members that the real reason my relationship with Lewis ended was all my doing, and that I had no sense of moral responsibility. She and Lewis claimed I was the one who flirted with other guys in his presence, which supposedly drove him to become paranoid and controlling. They basically painted me as this shameless flirt who caused all his insecurities. In reality, it had been the exact opposite. He would blatantly socialize with other women and expect me to keep quiet. Meanwhile, if I even said hello to my male friends, he acted like I'd committed a grave crime. He was the one who would tinker with my mind and push me to isolate myself from everyone. When word got back to me about their rumors, I felt frustrated, but I was also too busy to give them the reaction they obviously wanted. My life was too full to waste time stooping to their level. Plus, I knew nobody in the family who truly cared about me would believe these ridiculous stories. It was a waste of my energy to fight back against their pettiness, and I realized any reaction, on my part, would only feed their desire for attention. I also considered a way to stop them dead in their tracks. A single conversation with my aunt, Julia's mother, would have ended all the gossip. My aunt is my dad's older sister, and she happens to be a federal court judge known for her unbreakable moral compass. I knew with absolute certainty that if I approached her with the truth, she would shut down Julia's nonsense immediately. However, I also knew that would hurt Julia on a financial level, because she depended on her mother quite heavily. Her fledgling jewelry line was not exactly taking off. I preferred to handle the situation on my own, so I kept silent, letting Julia continue her charade. Occasionally, my other cousins would relay to me the outrageous things she was saying, and in an odd way, I found it almost entertaining. Around 6 months ago, Julia and Lewis announced their engagement and set a wedding date. My parents received an invitation, but I never did, which was perfectly fine by me. I wouldn't have gone even if they had asked me. I wasn't about to show up at a big celebration for two people who had essentially become my enemies. The wedding took place 3 days ago, and I assumed it would be just another day in my life. But then my phone started blowing up with messages from various relatives, all of them mentioning some speech Julia and Lewis had given. I was confused until my parents called me and said we needed to talk. That's how I learned about the monstrous things they had said about me during their wedding reception. That news infuriated me. According to my parents, Julia and Lewis used the platform of their wedding day to make disparaging remarks about me in front of everyone, determined to smear my name once and for all. They didn't name me directly, but kept referencing a certain ex-girlfriend who wasn't there, which obviously pointed to me. They rehashed all their usual rumors, that I was promiscuous, that I pursued money above all else and forced Lewis to pay for everything when we were dating because I was just a broke college kid. None of that was true. I have always been someone who splits bills dutifully, and I never demanded financial support from him. It was beyond insulting. But the part that actually stung the most was their accusation that I cheated on Lewis. They tried to convince everyone that my infidelity had been the catalyst for our breakup, and they claimed they felt relieved I wasn't attending the wedding so I wouldn't bring negativity into their lives. They also dared to stand up there and tell everyone in the family that from that point on, if I showed up at any gathering, they would not attend. They wanted to force everyone to pick a side. I felt completely blindsided by the extreme lengths they'd gone to in order to villainize me. My parents told me they had walked out as soon as Julia and Lewis started spewing these lies. My aunt, apparently, was perplexed and asked them if there was any truth to what Julia had claimed. She suspected it was out of character for me, and she was correct, it certainly was. I decided it was time to fight back. I dug into my old messages, scrolling deep into the archives, until I found all the screenshots of conversations that showed his real behavior during and after our breakup. I unearthed examples of his manipulative tactics, as well as his insults. In one of the more jarring chats, he said he wished he'd never gotten involved with me and felt he'd wasted 3 years of his life. He bragged that many women had shown an interest in him during our time together, and he couldn't wait to date someone else. It was obvious from his own words that he had never accused me of cheating back then, because if that had actually happened, he would have thrown it in my face with full force. Confident these texts proved my innocence, I posted them online without any commentary. I believed the evidence spoke for itself, and I was right. Once my family saw the screenshots, people started flooding my phone with supportive messages, acknowledging that the couple had been lying. They recognized those claims from Julia, and Louis clashed with everything they knew about me as a person. Some of my relatives even left the wedding early because they found their speech so distasteful. Their plan to turn the family against me backfired spectacularly. Even my aunt was no longer on their side, and that was a huge deal. That same night, I got frantic calls from Julia and Louis. They begged for my pardon, because after reading those screenshots, my aunt had confronted them, expressing how disappointed she was in her daughter's choice to spread falsehoods and try to destroy my reputation. My aunt ended up telling Julia that she would be cutting her off, both emotionally and financially, until Julia apologized to me and I decided to accept that apology. My aunt then left the wedding, ignoring Julia's pleas not to do so, because Julia and Louis depended on her for financial stability. Julia's jewelry venture wasn't going anywhere, and she had been planning to take a break from it, which would only worsen her reliance on her mother. That night, they called me and apologized over and over again, hoping I would not only remove the screenshot post, but also speak to my aunt so she would forgive them. My emotions were still running high, and I refused to absolve them or help. I blocked their numbers. In the aftermath, they tried all sorts of ways to reach me, and I remained perplexed about what the right thing to do might be. My aunt is a deeply upright person, and she had already reached out to me the day after the wedding to offer her apologies for what Julia had done. She didn't want our falling out to negatively affect our bond, and I assured her it wouldn't. We are good. But I know full well that I could probably resolve everything for Julia if I wanted to. Part of me feels it might be cold-hearted to stand by when I know how to fix this. Another part of me believes she deserves to face the consequences of betraying and slandering me. I remain conflicted about whether I should talk to my aunt on Julia's behalf. That's the core situation. I wondered if I was wrong for refusing to help my cousin, or talk to my aunt about forgiving her after she used her wedding day to spread more harmful lies about me in front of an audience. It felt so twisted and vicious that I can't help thinking she brought this on herself. Update 1. It has been about a week since the wedding. First, I want to clarify something that many people asked about. Why did my parents go to the wedding in the first place? Well, my parents, along with a lot of older family members, didn't know the full extent of what Julia and Louis had been saying about me to people around our age. Julia and Louis deliberately kept the older generation in the dark about their rumors. Therefore, my parents only knew there was tension between me and Julia after she started dating Louis, but they had no idea about the relentless gossip campaign. They chose to attend the wedding to show respect to my aunt, Julia's mother, and to honor family obligations. As soon as they realized what was being said during the wedding speech, they walked out and stopped speaking to the newlyweds. That's the short version of it, so please don't think poorly of my parents. They were just as appalled as anyone else once the truth came to light. Anyway, after that fiasco, I blocked Louis and Julia everywhere. They still tried to reach me by creating new profiles, sending emails, anything they could think of, but I refused to engage. Meanwhile, my aunt made it absolutely clear she was cutting financial ties with Julia until I forgave her. But the more I thought about it, the more I believed Julia didn't really deserve my forgiveness. For an entire year, I had kept my mouth shut and allowed them to say whatever they wanted to about me, hoping that ignoring them would make them lose interest. Instead, they escalated. They got up at their wedding and humiliated me publicly. So, at this point, I had no inclination to save her from the repercussions of her own actions. She is nearly 30 years old, yet she still wants to rely on her mother for money. This might actually be a learning experience for her. She should realize it's time to grow up, keep a steady job, and take responsibility for herself. I have no reason to feel guilty for letting things unfold. My parents and close friends reassured me that I am not obligated to help someone who maliciously attacked me. I did decide to remove the screenshots from my social media, simply because enough people in our family had already seen them, and I was getting tired of having it on my profile for the world at large. Taking it down seemed like the simplest way to maintain my own peace of mind. My reputation in the family was already cleared, and I wanted to move on with my life. I told myself I needed to let go of the anger and guilt. I tried meditating again, focusing on a more zen approach to all of the negativity. Hopefully, Julia and Louis will also work on themselves instead of obsessing about me non-stop. I think it would do us all a world of good if they found new goals that didn't revolve around tearing me down. Update 2. A month has passed since the wedding. Julia and Lewis apparently haven't stopped their antics. My aunt is still ignoring them because I have not given any sign of forgiving them, and by now, I don't even care if they do apologize again. Their so-called apology was obviously a ploy to regain financial support. A few days after they gave up trying to persuade me, they resumed gossiping behind my back. This time, they got inventive with their rumors. They are telling anyone who will listen, whenever they run into a relative in public, that I'm deliberately trying to destroy their relationship with my aunt so I can get all her inheritance. It's ludicrous. I come from a financially comfortable background. I have a stable job, and there is no reason for me to covet my aunt's money. The fact that they keep inventing bizarre narratives suggests they might be the ones desperate for inheritance. Most of the family avoids them now, but Julia and Lewis still blab about me whenever they can corner someone. Last week, I had finally had enough. I told my aunt what they were claiming. She was furious, and she told me she wouldn't forgive them even if they came crawling back on their knees. She let Julia know she was done, then blocked her number again. Furious at me for snitching, Julia and Lewis sent yet another email, anonymously, of course, threatening that I would regret what I had done. Their threats don't frighten me, but they do annoy me. I wrote back, warning them I would involve law enforcement if they tried any underhanded tactics. I have a good security system at home, so I wasn't overly concerned, but I didn't want to take chances. Update 3. About 4 days ago, they sent one more email telling me I would suffer the consequences of my actions, to which I reiterated my warning that any attempts to come near me or my property would result in legal action. But last night, they did something unbelievably foolish. They tried breaking into my house around 1 a.m. Julia knows my security system is advanced, having visited me in the past. The moment they tried messing with my front door, the alarm kicked in, and I was alerted immediately. I had a strong hunch it was them, but I wasn't going to wait around to confirm. I called the police right away. They responded in about 15 minutes, and wouldn't you know it, Julia and Lewis were dressed like burglars. They tried fleeing on foot. They had cycled over, clearly thinking that would keep them stealthy, but the cops intercepted them. In an apparent effort to defend themselves, they admitted they were not trying to steal anything, just trying to break into, have a talk, and presumably spook me or pressure me into bending to their will. I have no idea why they thought that would sound any less incriminating. As soon as the officers handcuffed them, Julia burst into tears, begging me not to press charges. I didn't have even a drop of sympathy left for her. How many chances are you supposed to give to people who keep behaving badly? Lewis glared at me with raw hatred, but I've seen that look before and it means nothing to me now. I went back to bed after that because I had work in the morning. When I woke up, I told both my aunt and my parents what had happened. They were in the loop already. Julia had used her one call to phone her mother, begging her to pay bail. My aunt refused to get involved. As of now, I am absolutely moving forward with pressing charges. I want a protective order, because these two have clearly gone off the rails. I have no interest in enabling them ever again, and I am fully prepared to see this through legally if that's what it takes to keep them from terrorizing me any further. I'm beyond done with their obsession. They made their bed, and now they have to deal with the consequences of their own destructive behavior.